to Belle's OT Corner. I am so happy to have you all in today and listening along as we jump into all things for our taste and our smell system. So our taste is also known as our gustatory system. And I don't know if I'm saying that right. I always get that one wrong. So I prefer taste and smell because this is how we colloquially refer to them anyway. So I hope you all had a lovely weekend and are ready to jump in and learn some new things. So we'll start off with our taste and then we'll move into our smell afterwards. So for our taste system, what is it? How does it work? And what happens when it goes wrong? We're going to answer those same questions that we have every episode so far for this little season. So number one, what is it? Well, just like all of our systems, taste comes from when we have receptors somewhere. In this case, I'm sure you guessed it, we have receptors in our mouth that take some information and send it up to our brain for our brain to process. And these tell us about the sensations in our mouth. And so the tongue helps us detect things like, is it sweet? Is it salty? Is it sour? Is it bitter? Or does it have that savory umami taste to it? And it takes these bits of information up to the brain, and the brain can then decide, yep, I know exactly what that tastes like. And it also decides, do I like or do I not like that taste? So is that sensation something that I like and want to have again? Or is that sensation something that I really don't like? For example, personally, I love chocolate. I can eat way too much chocolate, and it's very much a sense that my brain goes, yes, I like that. It's nice and sweet. If I'm having a bit of dark chocolate, it's a little bit bitter as well. It works for my brain. However, I really don't like eggs. The taste of eggs and the smell of eggs in particular, when you put both of those together, which is why we're doing these two senses together, but the taste of eggs for me is not something that my brain likes at all and then will avoid. And so I choose not to eat all that many eggs if I can help it. So we have the parts of our tongue that do the taste side of things, that sweet, salty, sour, bitter, all of those. We also have bits in our tongue that help us detect pain and heat. So pain, I'm sure we're all familiar with from times when we've accidentally bitten down on our tongue and it hurts. So we definitely have receptors that account for that pain. And then we have the receptors that do temperature and heat. And so this helps us distinguish between primarily, is this a safe temperature to eat? Or if I swallow this, is this going to be unsafe for my body? Is it too hot or too cold? But also it then builds into what temperatures do I like my food to be. Some people will prefer their food to be on the really, really hot side, whereas other people prefer their food to have at that more room temperature. And so there's lots of bits and pieces that our tongue is doing and lots of different bits of information that it's receiving before it gets sent up to the brain for the brain to then figure out what's happening. Now, there is another sense that is involved, particularly around our mouth, and that is our tactile sense. And so this plays a role in knowing the textures of the food. Is it something slimy like eggs? Or is it something that's a little bit crunchy? Is it hard? Is it soft? Is it squishy? Having that idea of what that food feels like in our mouth is then added on to how it tastes and what the temperature is. So that's quite a complex part, and we'll talk a little bit about the tactile side of things in relation to the mouth only, whereas when we talk about the tactile system in a later episode, we'll focus more on the whole body tactile side of things. But it does play a role within the mouth as well. So that's what it is and how it works. Well, now we need to think about what happens when we have our different preferences or our different sensory needs, and therefore how can that impact upon my engagement occupations. And if we're thinking about the mouth, these occupations are largely things like being able to eat my food, being able to brush my teeth, and engage in and drink water as well is the other one. So those things that are largely based around what my mouth is doing. And if we're having those difficulties, and if some of those difficulties are actually impacting upon my ability to engage, well, then what can we do? And so, as always, we're going to talk about this within the frame of that over-responsive and under-responsive again, as we have with every other episode so far. So, over-responsive is where I notice every single little bit of input. And so a small little change, or what might be perceived as a small change, for this individual's brain is noticed as a very big change. So within the realm of taste, this can be a very heightened sensitivity to taste. Something that, I may taste and think tastes pretty much the same. It's the same thing. Another child might be able to identify that exact difference within the taste. So they could then have difficulties trying new foods because they don't know what to expect. And there's too many new components in there. It's too overwhelming for my brain to process. And so I prefer to stick with my safe foods that I know and my safe foods that I can trust, because that's easier for my brain to then process, to be able to engage in that occupation of having some food. They also might want foods to be a specific temperature. And if we think about this in terms of cognitive load, if I know that my food is always going to be room temperature, or my food is always going to be just a little warm, I don't have to think about that. I know that that's expected, which means that my brain can then focus on figuring out all the components of how that food tastes and not having to think about what temperature it is on top of that. And so the more that I can control around this experience that I know is quite stressful for me, because there's lots of thinking involved for my brain and I'm going to be on edge, the more that I can control, the safer I feel and the more willing I feel to be able to engage in that. Typically, we see kids that are over-responsive might not like brushing their teeth. Brushing our teeth is a hugely intense sensation for our mouth. We have the tactile side of it, the bristles, the hard part of the toothbrush. Is it going to touch my gums? Is it going to touch my teeth? What part of my teeth is it going to touch? Is it going to touch the inside of my cheek as well? Is it going to touch my tongue? How do I keep my tongue out of the way so it doesn't get touched? You see, there's lots of bits and pieces, and that's just the tactile side. And then we add the toothpaste. Is it strong minty toothpaste? Is it not minty toothpaste? Is it strawberry toothpaste? Is it flavored toothpaste? How much? How strong is that taste then going to be? Is it just a little bit of toothpaste that's been watered down and so it doesn't taste that strong? How much water is there? All of these components then play into the taste side of things as well. And so you can see that brushing our teeth, for something that we have to do every day, twice a day, all of a sudden that's a lot for my brain to do and a lot for my brain to think about. And so that's really hard, and I don't want to engage in that. I perceive that sensation, or a child may perceive that sensation as too hard, too stressful, and a threat to me, particularly around the minty toothpaste. Minty can be a really, really strong taste sensation, and when we have children that can be over-responsive, they could perceive that as a threat, and so they could gag, they could try and move away, and it is a sensation that their body tells them is not safe. The other thing that we can see with some of these over-responsive children, and it links back into what I was saying before about wanting to control as much as they can, because this is a very tricky task, is mixed textures can be really challenging for them, because mixed textures, we also typically have mixed tastes. And mixed textures means that my brain not only has to think about the taste of the food, but figure out, well, there's a bit of this that's a little bit smooth, and there's a bit of this that's a little bit crunchy, and there's a little bit of this that feels really long. So, for example, if you think about spaghetti bolognese, you have pasta in there. Is the pasta soft? Is it al dente and got a little bit of a crunch to it? Is it... So that's the pasta side. And then what about the sauce? How saucy is it? Is there carrots in there that haven't quite been cooked and so have a bit of a crunch to them? Are there other veggies in there? Is the mince in there? How crunchy is the mince? What about some of those other herbs? So see all these different bits that the brain then has to think through. And so when I'm already know I'm going to have to be doing a lot of thinking just to deal with the taste side of it, we can see these children will have one food at a time and not like those mixed textures and not be able, their brain struggles to process that mixed taste. It's too much. And so that's when you see the refusals and the meltdowns and the real difficulties around having those combined tastes. So what can we do for these over-responsive kiddies? How can we help them? Because ultimately, as mum and dad or as teachers, we want these children to be able to A, engage in eating enough food so that they're getting a healthy diet, and B, able to brush their teeth so we can keep our teeth clean, and be able to drink as well throughout the day. To those bits around keeping our body nice and safe and functioning and healthy. So if we think about brushing teeth, we can look at trying different toothpastes. We can look at just starting with water and talking about how that water tastes and what that feels like. And then we might try the tiniest bit of toothpaste, but mix it in with a lot of water because water is safe and I know that. And it's just going to be a small taste that I don't have to deal with. And having these really open conversations with your child about, well, this is what it tastes like and this is what it feels like. And they can start to build their own language around what that tastes like. I once worked with a child, and when we talked about using toothpaste, he was just using a off-the-shelf minty toothpaste, and he looks at me and he goes, "My tongue burns." And I went, "Great, that's fantastic to know." Tying in with a little bit of that interoception that we talked about last week, helping them build up that language around what it feels like. And also, if it is something that they struggle to do, and if you find a toothpaste that they can tolerate, the more that we can talk about it and set those parameters around the task. Okay, so remember, this toothpaste is strawberry flavored, it's a little bit sweet, and we're going to brush our teeth for 2 minutes. And so we're going to put a little video on, or we're going to put a little timer on for 2 minutes, and we're going to brush our teeth. And then at the end, you can tell me, how sweet was the strawberry today? Was it just a little sweet, or was it really sweet? So they feel like they have that control around the task, and they can actually get their mouth ready for that taste sensation that they're about to experience. In terms of if we think around the feeding side of things, and I'll probably do some more episodes later on around feeding because it is a very big complex topic, from using cutlery to being able to manage the tastes, from being able to manage the textures, from being able to manage a wide variety of diets. But we'll just touch on a little bit specific to taste today. And so having safe foods and foods that I know and I like separate, and I mean separate on a physical plate, to other foods. And these other foods are foods that I can try or I can explore. And we adding in this language about what the food tastes like. Not just is it yummy or is it yucky, but this is a really great spot to start. But after that, why is it yummy? What does it taste like? Does it taste like something else you've had before? And helping them start to make those links. And then when we look at foods that we'd like the child to try, you can start to talk about your own experiences. To me, this one tastes a little bit sweet. Sweet like something that they know, but not as sweet as something that they don't like. Or it might be a little bit salty, or it might be a little bit spicy. Maybe it's a little bit hot. And so the more that we can talk about and start to bring some of this language in and around, and it doesn't matter if your child doesn't want to engage in the language back, you can just model this to them around what you feel and what you experience as well. Part of this, and part of the reason this can be so powerful, is the more that we can cue our brain for what to expect, the easier it is to then engage in that activity. And whilst they may perceive the taste as different to you, if it is spicy, they probably will feel a little bit of spice with it. It might not be the same amount of spice as what you had. If it is cold and sweet, like ice cream, for example, we can get that brain ready that it's going to be cold, it's going to be a bit sweet. Does it have some crunchy chocolate bits in it? What else is in that ice cream? So that as that food goes into the mouth and as those messages start firing and they're getting received by the brain can go, yep, cool, I know that one. I was expecting that one. Or, okay, I was expecting that, and that's something new and different, so we can focus on that one a little bit more. The more prep that we can give the brain, the easier it is to engage in that task. And the other thing that we can do, particularly around food and meal times, is engaging in some of that tactile side of things. And the best way to do this is, instead of expecting the children to put everything in their mouth, actually allowing them to play with it with their hands. And yes, it's messy, and yes, it can be chaos, but this is actually really important for our brain in terms of that getting ready for what to expect. Because if I can play with a crunchy chip and I can break it and I can squish it and I can feel it with my hand, my brain starts to understand that tactile experience related to that particular food. And that tactile experience is going to be the same when it's in my mouth. And so my brain is already ready for the tactile side of the food before we have to then think about the taste side of the food. So then we have our hypo-responsive kids. And these are the children that need a lot of input, that they're constantly seeking out some of these inputs. And that unlike some of our over-responsive kiddies, our under-responsive kiddies need lots and lots and lots of input before they can notice it. So, what might these children look like? These could be children that like really strong and really spicy flavors, to the point where you might be watching them eat, physically cringing because that would burn your mouth, but they love it. They seek that constant stimulation with their mouth. They might be eating lots of non-edible items and putting everything in their mouth. And they might be craving specific textures, so they might love things that are really chewy or that are really crunchy. That means their mouth has to work really hard to keep eating it. These are the kids that we see that will constantly want more and more things in their mouth so that they can meet that need to have those different sensations. So what can we do? Because if we have children that are putting everything in their mouth, particularly non-edible items, it can be very stressful as a parent. So I'll address this one first. What we want to make sure we're doing is that we're providing the children with alternatives and ways to seek out that input or meet that need in a safe way. So this could be building in more new flavors to try so that their brain has that new experience. Could be using flavored gum because that is a safe thing to chew depending upon the age of the child. You might add in more chewy and crunchy snacks throughout the day. So instead of a snack just being a piece of fruit, we could have a piece of fruit and a really chewy, crunchy bar that I'm going to need to get all of that input. It's going to get moved around my mouth. All different parts of my mouth are going to be involved, and it's going to take me longer to chew it. Or it might be that you get some dried bits of fruit, like dried mangoes, because they're really, really chewy. You can do extra activities throughout your child's day that are going to target increased oral input. So things like blowing bubbles are great. Things like using a straw. So having a straw in general in our drinks, because then we have to get that strong suck. But equally using a straw as we play games. So one of my favorite is having little ping pong balls or cotton buds on a table or on the floor, lying on your tummy and having to use the straw to blow it around and having little ping pong ball races. It might be that to help meet their needs, we build in having an electric toothbrush, because the vibration from the toothbrush, again, adds an extra dimension that their brain has to think about and process. And then the last one, if you find that you're still not quite meeting that child's needs, jewellery, which is those little chewies that can come on a little string. There's bracelets ones, there's necklace ones, there's ones that can go on the end of a pencil. There's lots of different options, but these can be great. But we want to make sure that as we're introducing these, we're being really clear with the children that if we see them chewing something that we don't want them to chew, or if they're chewing something that is not safe to chew, we can say, oh, we don't chew this, and we can give them the object that they can chew. This is what we can chew. And the big one with this is we want to be doing it around helping them engage in the occupation. So if our occupation and if the play task is all around putting things in our mouth, then we want those to be food-based items that we can explore. If they're playing and you notice that as they're playing, they're putting things in their mouth, well, then we can use something like some gum or like some jewelry to say, let's put this in our mouth so that you can then keep focusing. So you can chew on this is safe, and then we can play. In class, it might be, let's put this in our mouth, or let's put this on the end of your pencil. So when your brain is working really hard and focusing, you can chew on this to help you keep listening and keep focused. And we can help them start to understand what their body needs and how we can meet that in a safe way to allow them to engage in the tasks. So that's all about our taste and how our taste works. It's all about what is happening within my mouth, what is that sensations like, and how we can help support children that may not like any of those sensations, and also those children that seek out a lot of that input. Next, we're going to chat about our smell, because as I said before, they are quite closely linked. So when we look at our smell, and this is also known as our olfactory sense, it is all done from receptors in our nose. And the really interesting thing about smell is we have these receptors that's in the tissue in our nose, and as you smell something, it gets a message and it takes it up to the brain. Now, once it goes up to the brain, it goes to a couple of different places. Number one, it goes and it thinks about what that smell is, what does that smell like, and is it a nice smell or a not nice smell, and then it creates that action plan exactly the same as everything else that we've done. It also starts to think about, well, do I know that smell in relation to something else? And so this is where it accesses our memories. And smell actually has a really close link to our memories, where you might go outside and smell freshly cut grass. And you might get this really nice feeling about when you were a kid and your dad was outside cutting the grass and it just smelled great. Or it might be that you walk past something and it smells bad. You don't necessarily know what it was, but you have a physical reaction because last time you smelt that smell, it was not a very nice place to be. This information also does go up, and it deals a little bit with our taste. And so it helps us start to get ready for what that taste is. For example, if you smell some bacon, you might start to taste bacon on your tongue or know what that feeling is going to taste like because you've had that sensation before. On the opposite side, and personally I'm going to use the example of eggs again for myself, when I smell eggs cooking and they're quite a distinctive smell, I will either have a bit of a gag, or I will have a very strong memory and strong taste response about, that does not feel nice, that does not taste nice, I do not like that sense. So not only do we process the smell in terms of what it smells like, do I like it, do I not like it, and what is my action plan, we also process smells in terms of when was the last time I smelt that, and also helping us get ready for some of the things that we might taste, which is why we're doing these two together, because as I did say before, they're quite closely linked, particularly if your child is having difficulties with feeding. It's important to consider both the taste of the food, the texture of the food, as we talked about before, and the smell of the food, because your child's brain is processing all three of these bits together and not just one in isolation. But we will have a separate little season on feeding and difficulties there, but just to kind of flag it here. So our smell. Our smell comes up, and the first thing our brain does is this a safe smell or is this a harmful smell? And this is really important if you think of things like smelling smoke in a house. That's a harm. I need to get out of the house. That's not safe. If you've opened your fridge to find some food and you've taken the lid off the milk and you smell it and you go, ooh, that smells off, It's no longer safe, therefore I'm going to tip the milk down the sink because it's not safe for my body. So bits of our smell, again, have that protective side where it's looking for what is safe and nice and what is a threat to myself and therefore a smell that I want to avoid. In addition to all of this, some of our smells can be a little bit alerting and some of our smells can be a little bit calming. So if you think of lavender, typically is quite a calming sense, whereas citrus is quite bright and alerting. And so we can look at playing in with different smells around times to support our children to engage in the activity. For example, if we're trying to wind down for bedtime or wind down for nap time, and I've got a candle burning or a diffuser on that's a really strong citrusy smell, your child's brain is processing two very conflicting bits of information. Of mum's telling me that it's time to calm down, she's got some quiet, slow music on, but then at the same time my brain's smelling this smell and it's turning all my brain back on. So we look at that environment in terms of what smells we can put in place to match the occupation or the task that our child's engaging in. So that's a bit of a breakdown of what our olfactory system is. It's those receptors in our nose going up to our brain. Number one, it does the safe or not safe and what's my action plan. Number two, it links to memories and our limbic systems. That's our memory system. And about when did I last smell this? Did I like it? Did I not like it? And then if we're looking at food, it also links to what that might taste like and helps our brain and our body get ready for what that might taste like. For example, if you walk into a house and there's cookies baking, your mouth starts to water a little bit because you want that taste. It's a yummy thing if you like chocolate chip cookies. So then, as always, what happens when this goes a little bit haywire? And we have those under-responsive and those over-responsive situations. So we'll talk a little bit about the under-responsive side of this first. And as I'm sure you're all getting really good at knowing, under-responsive is when we need a lot of input. So either we actively seek it out, and you see kids that are actively looking for more and more smells, or we might need to help that child get that extra bit of smells to help them come to a point where their brain can focus. So what might we see in some of these under-responsive kids? We might see that it needs to be a really, really strong smell before they notice the smell in their environment. They might not be aware of spoiled foods. And so as they get older, they need to start looking at, well, how can I make sure I know if this food is safe for my body or not, because I don't smell it, I don't notice it. They might be a child that smells objects frequently, especially strong odors. So maybe you notice your child will smell people, maybe they'll smell objects, maybe they will constantly try, if they find a smell that they like, they're bringing it as close as possible to their nose to get that really strong smell. These are some of the things that we see in those children that are under-responsive, and so they're seeking out that really, really strong sense. So what can we do to help these kiddies? Lots is the answer. And we can do it in kind of two different ways as well. So we can do it if we think about helping build in more smells throughout their day, so their brain doesn't have to actively seek them out. And we can look at if their way of seeking out those smells is impacting upon their ability to engage in a task, we can help them find alternatives that allow them to engage. So just like we were talking about when some children like chewing and having those things in their mouth, that I can give you this to help your brain focus and help your brain engage. This is safe to chew on so that we can do this task. It's the exact same framework that we can apply to the smells. So first, some of the ways that we can bring some smells into the daily routines. And so it might be that we look at building in some candles in the morning that are going to just help add that extra bit of input into your child's sensory day to help bring them up and help them focus. Maybe you'll use some scented hand creams with your child so that throughout the day they can smell their hands, get that nice input, feel a little bit more calmed and settled. within the classroom or even at home, if you know you have a child that benefits from having lots of smells around them, then using things like scented Play-Doh or scented markers, and so building in another sense into that activity to meet that child's needs so that they can then focus on playing instead of focusing on what else can I smell, because that need is getting met. If we start to think about sometimes when the child's way of seeking out that input might be impacting upon their ability to engage in a task. For example, if you've ever seen a child, or maybe one of your children, or a child in your class that might smell everything. And so, for example, within the classroom, you've set some work, everyone's sitting down, and you look over and this child is smelling the pencil and smelling the lead and smelling the rubber and smelling the paper. And in this time, all the other children have started their work, and so you know he's not going to be able to finish the work on time. And is that going to mean he has to stay back at recess to finish it? Or does he then not get the same amount of work? And so as a teacher, you can start to feel conflicted with how to support this child so that he can also meet the needs within the classroom. And this is where we can look at things like, maybe we can give this child a bit of fabric and we can chat with mum about what some of his preferred scents are and put a little bit of those scents into the fabric so that as he's getting ready, he can have that in one hand and he can smell his fabric, and then his brain and his body is ready to then engage in that task. Or maybe we look at things like having one of those scented markers. Or maybe it's that we look at, well, is there a point in the classroom where there is a nicer smell that the child likes? Do you have a candle in your classroom? Do you have an air freshener in your classroom? And could we move the child so they're sitting closer to that smell where it's going to be a little bit more intense to help them then focus and engage? And it's that exact same framework that you can apply into the home environment, except you can actually do a little bit more because it's just you and your family, and you don't have to worry about the 20 or 30 other children in the class and their sensory needs as well. So this is a really important one to think about. When you're looking at implementing something for one child, we do need to think about how that might impact upon the rest of the children as well. Other things that we might look to help with in terms of some of these children that are under-responsive, particularly as they might get a little bit older, is do they recognize their own body odor and start to understand that either I need to have a shower or I need to put on deodorant. And if they don't, that's okay. But what other strategies and supports can we put in place? Do we put the deodorant in a really obvious spot so that it becomes a habit to put it on even if I don't notice? Do we have a little checklist of have I showered today to help us remember to wash? Or maybe when I'm in the shower, is there a checklist to wash under my arms to help me manage some of those body odor components if I'm not going to get that feedback from my nose that says, oh, it's probably time to take a shower, we're getting a little bit smelly. The other side that we can see as we work with older children as well is as they start to be a bit more independent in terms of food management, how can we help them notice when food might not be safe to eat? If they're not going to have that smell sensation and they're not going to be able to process that, oh, that's a little bit of a threat, that feels a little bit off. Okay, so then we need to build in other strategies to recognize that. Does it feel slimy? Does it look different? Does it have some mold growing on it? If I start to pour the milk, is it a little bit clumpy? All of these different strategies are ones that you can talk through with your child about, okay, so you don't smell it. And instead of being like, can't you smell that? Oh my goodness, how did you not realize? Be like, oh, that's really interesting. You didn't realize that. Did you smell it? No. Okay, so, and engage in that problem solving to help your child find those other ways to be able to make sure that they're safe when engaging in some of that food prep side of things. So that's for our little kiddies that are under-responsive. Now, if we think about those kiddies that are over-responsive, and so again, as I'm sure you know, these are the children that are super sensitive to smell. And they have a heightened sensitivity to smell, and they might notice smells that other children or other adults haven't even noticed. or that don't bother you. Your brain has the smell's gone up to your brain, but your brain's gone, nope, not important. I don't need to pay attention to that information. Whereas for this particular child, that smell goes up to their brain and they go, nope, that's really important. We need to deal with that, and we need to either move myself away, get rid of the smell, or it's going to be too much and it's going to be the only thing that I can focus on until the smell is dealt with and resolved. And so what might we see in some of these children? So some of the smells could induce a physical response and in sometimes a sense of illness. And so this is where you might see children who gag, children who report they feel a little bit sick, or maybe they get headaches and you can't quite figure out the cause of the headaches. Maybe think about some of the smells in their environment, and is there a consistent smell around when they're starting to feel sick every time? We might see these children will refuse foods based on smell. And this could be because the last time they smelled that and they put the food in their mouths, they had a very bad response. Or it could be that the smell is so strong that their brain cannot process and get ready for that sense and that taste in their mouths as well. And so there's lots of reasons why we might refuse food before it's even touched our lips. And the smell is a very big one of them. These children might have difficulty going into new spaces where they're unsure what the smells are going to be, and so they can't get their body ready for what they're about to experience. Or there might be too many different smells for their brain to be able to process and engage with. You also might see these children that are bothered by cleaning products or perfumes or different smells in their environment that to you might smell, nice and fresh. Or maybe it's a little bit subtle, but it's fine and your brain can deal with it. And to these children, it's too overpowering and too strong. Particularly in the classroom, you can see that these children might be distracted by smells in their environment. So this could be smells in the classroom itself, from smells of other children, to smells of kids that have come in that are a bit sweaty, to the bin over there is a bit stinky, to I can smell down the hall someone's cooking something. There's lots of different smells within a school. And then if you expand that to thinking about the dinner hall or the canteen area, and if a child has to engage in that area, then all of a sudden there's lots of smells and lots of unpredictability, particularly if someone else has a packed lunch and theirs might be a curry and curries smell really strong. And then someone else next to you has some mushrooms, or they have something really sweet and that has a really strong smell to it as well. And then there's the hot food that someone's gotten from the canteen and that has a different smell. So all of a sudden this environment becomes very, very powerful and very overwhelming. The other environment that can be very powerful from a smell perspective is toilets. Toilets at school, toilets at home, toilets in the community, with in particular toilets at school and home, in the community being quite smelly and can sometimes be very nice, but also sometimes can be a really intense sensation to process. And because our smell is so closely linked to our limbic system and that memory, if you've ever gone into a bathroom in the community and it hasn't been cleaned for a while and it really stinks, and as soon as you start to think about it, you pull a bit of a face and you have a bit of a reaction. Now imagine that the next time you go into a toilet, that is the only thing that you can think of. You're standing outside the toilet and all you can think of is that really unpleasant experience you had last time. And you just cannot get your brain and your body ready to go into that bathroom and have that experience again. And this is when we can then see kids that might refuse to use the bathroom entirely, or refuse to go into a dining hall because it's just too strong and it's just too hard for my brain to process. So what can we do? How can we help these children that are really, really sensitive to smell? Well, if we think about it from an environment perspective, we can look at just removing as many of the smells as we can. So we can use fragrance-free cleaning products. Try to say that 10 times fast. We could avoid perfumes and colognes. We can make sure that we empty the trash or the bin regularly, and we put the child as far away from that, particularly within the classroom. Can we move where the child sits so they're closer to a window and further away from the bin to try and minimize some of those smells? We can make sure that we keep rooms really nicely and well ventilated as much as we can. We can also look at what smells does the child like. What smells do they find calming? And you can talk through this with your child. You might practice smelling some different things and having them start to bring some words to those smells and describe those smells. Again, working with a little bit of that interoceptive space, being like, this smell smells like something fresh. This smell smells really sweet. I like this smell. This smell makes my body feel nice and calm. Or nope, that smell makes my tummy feel all twisty and I don't like that smell. The more we can start to identify smells that the child might like, the more we can start to look at, okay, so if we have to do something that's going to be tricky and is going to have smells that you don't like, let's have a smell that you do like nearby so that you can smell that and focus on that instead of having to focus on the smell that is too much. If we think about within the school what we could do here, and I talked a couple about in the classroom how we can look at moving where that child sits and looking at limiting their exposure to different smells so they can focus on the task. If we think about times like the dining hall, we can look at talking to the child about what they smell in the dining hall and say, okay, so we're going to go in and we're going to sit in there for this amount of time so they know the limit and their brain knows that limit, and that if it gets too much and you need a break, this is the strategy that we can put in. Maybe you're just going to have 3 or 4 mouthfuls of your food in the dining hall, and then we'll see if there's another spot that you can go and access to finish your meal. And we work towards slowly building up that child's tolerance with enough strategies to support them to be able to persist through that task. So maybe it is we build in some proprioceptive strategies on our way to the dining hall just to help bring our brain down and help organize everything, knowing that that's going to be a really intense, tricky sensation for our brain to process. And we build in those opportunities for this is how you ask for a break. You can just tell me, and maybe you have a code word with this child, or maybe they could hand you a little picture, or maybe if you notice that they're starting to fidget and they're starting to block their nose, and you can say, I think the smell is really bothering you. Should we just step outside and have 3 big breaths of fresh air and then we can come back in? And so not only just relying on the child to tell you when they need the break, but actually watching what their behavior is doing, labeling what you can see their body doing, and coming up with a shared solution together. So that wraps up our smells and our olfactory system, and you can see how, particularly because how much it plays in with our memories, that this can be a really big sense to be able to help children start to engage with and help them start to build some of those strategies. But what I want you to remember as you start to think about some of these and you start to watch some of the children you work with or look at your own child is looking at, what do they like? What don't they like? How can we limit what they don't like if that's going to be the best outcome? Or how can we build those strategies to help them engage and help them persist through the task while still meeting their needs? So this could be from building in more smells into their environment, or it could be from putting in those supports around, this is going to be smelly. Should we hold our breath for 10 seconds? Or should we have something else that you can smell? Or should you tell your brain, it's just 10 seconds, I can do it, and then I'm going to come out and do this activity to help my brain and my body feel better again. And so it's all about, what is the task the child is wanting to do or needing to do? Is it that I need to engage and listen in the classroom? Is it that I need to be able to use the toilet? Is it that at home I want to be able to use some smells or use some food and some tastes to help me focus a bit more, or so that I can relax and calm down at nighttime? Thinking about those tasks that the child has to do and looking at, is there an impact here from smell? Is there an impact here from taste? Is it a positive impact, or is it actually getting in the way of us being able to engage? In which case, what can we do and how can we help that child engage in some of these tasks a bit more and engage in some of these occupations? Alrighty guys, that is our taste and our smells. So in 2 weeks, next episode, we're going to talk more about our sight and our hearing. And then after that, our last episode on the in this sensory season is going to be all about our tactile system, so our touch system. So we're almost there, only 2 more and our first season will be finished. It's crazy. If you have any questions about today's or anything that we've talked through, by all means, please send me a message, let me know, and we can maybe even have a Q&A session as our last wrap up. So any questions you have about anything sensory, please send them through. And if I get enough, I'll do a little bit of a Q&A session as well. As always, if you found this helpful, please leave a review, comment, share it with a friend. All of these bits really help me get the podcast out there and into the people's ears that it's going to help the most, because that's what this is all about, is giving parents, teachers, therapists, anyone that wants to listen, some more insight and some easy strategies that they can start to try with the children in their lives. Alrighty guys, that's all for now, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. I hope you all have a lovely week. Bye!